Alrighty, we're back with another Simpsons Unhinged episode, and I will do a quick recap of what we talked about. Of course, everything will be in the playlist down below in the description. We talked about Lisa Goes Gaga, that 20-minute episode of Lady Gaga, the 90s show when Homer and Marge get together and they try to plug up a plot hole with Bart's birth. Homer and Bongo, how he lost Bongo thanks to him playing Mr. Burns, and how he mistrusts Abe and Bongo and dogs, for that matter. Homer at the Bat, the famous season 3 episode that beat the Cosby Show first run syndication when it was on a Thursday. The Olympics episode in Vancouver, we talked about. Maud's death, yes, we talked about that episode and how it changed characters such as Homer and Ned. We talked about the 15th season Christmas episode in which Homer tries to do good, but Ned feels jealous. The Principal and the Pauper, yes, I talked about that episode that jumped the shark and how it was a decent episode, but just bad premise. Homer and Apu, I talked about that episode when Apu gets fired thanks to Homer's negligence and talking about Apu and all that. Lisa the Vegetarian, the one that saw Lisa turn vegetarian for good and how Paul McCartney influenced that decision. Love is a Many Strangled Thing. I talked about that episode that saw, The Simpsons implying that Homer needs to strangle Bart because Bart's bad tendencies happen, which is stupid. Tata, while has forsaken me. That's the episode in which Todd turns his back on God after he takes down Maud and he can't remember Maud's face and all that. And Ned sends him to The Simpsons, and a lot of things happen. Lisa gets an F1. That's the episode when Lisa decides to do driving and all that, and Homer and Marge's roles are reversed. The gay marriage episode from season 16, there's something about marrying, the fact that, gay marriage just puts up everything, and Homer gives up his anti-gay rights for the almighty dollar to marry these gay people, and of course, the couch gag with the Stanley Cup pissing me off. Diary Queen, we talked about that episode when Bart gets and this diary, but then realizes he needs to do good. And then Lisa, for some stupid reason, decides to tell Bart that's not, she wasn't talking about him, but Flanders cheers him up. And then I talked about the Family Guy episode in 2014, the crossover with The Simpsons, how it basically made Family Guy look bad and may have given The Simpsons a second win. Bart the Mother, I talked about the conflict between Bart and Marge. Bart kills a bird and decides to deal with its eggs out of guilt, but it's tree lizards. And then we talked about the Italian Bob, how strangely the subplot of the previous episode when Lisa tries to learn Italian from Millhouse actually turns good into the next episode's main plot about going to Italy. Talked about Homer's Enemy, the famous season 8 episode that they were just trying to out Homer's sloth-like stuff, but it made Homer more popular. Talked about Kill Gill, and of course, what the real Jims has not done, and basically talk about Marge's psychosis. The Hail Mary, no, sorry, the Simpsons movie was next, number 21. It talked about the Simpsons movie and its plots and how Homer basically may have planned this the whole time. Talked about Homer Ned's Hail Mary, the season 16 episode after the Super Bowl that saw, you know, everyone upset with Homer and Ned's halftime thing about the Bible and basically how it was too safe from the previous year. Talked about Trash of the Titans, that the episode that saw Homer become garbage commissioner, botch everything up, and then the town moves 5 miles down the road and Homer doesn't get punished for his role. I talked about the FIFA episode. Well, I croaked that FIFA episode about Homer being to Brazil and being bribed. Who Shot Mr. Burns? The 25th episode, I talked about that one, all the premises. And then Trios of Horror from season 2, the first ever episode, You Don't Forget Your First, and how it was influential. And then you got Homer's Phobia from season 8, well, with the end of Gay Pride Month. How Homer tries to juggle his anti-gay fears with the fact that he needs to be soothing towards his son. We talked about Doe Canada, season 30. That was the episode that the Simpsons went to Canada. Lisa ends up in Canada for political asylum, mad about Trump's first term. And this is his first term, which was actually tame compared to the second term. That's just what I feel. And how Marge tries to get her back to the United States for some strange reason. The Bart Mangled Banner, that was the 4th of July episode, which Bart accidentally moons the flag while being deaf. temporarily deaf, and how everyone made such a big deal out of it. More, I did the season 4 comparison episode, March versus the Monorail versus um, Last Exit to Springfield. Two great episodes that everyone says are the greatest of all time. I did a who did it best. I'd say March versus Monorail, but that's just me. And last week I talked about season 37 going past, present, future, the current season, the last season that existed. And now I'm going to be talking about season 14 episode, which sees, the Simpsons make kind of a number boo boo, but it basically proves that Bart and Homer just don't have a good relationship. I submit to you, Barting over. Jerk Homer, Marge's worries, Bart's pranks, Lisa's causes, Maggie not talking a lot, Grandpa being senile, Patty and Selma boring Marge, Arnie Sif is a jerk, Chief Wiggum making things happen, Mr. Burns being a dick. You can never stop the Simpsons. Heaven knows they've been trying for years and they still come back for more. 37 seasons is a bit much, don't you think? It's a crazy Simpsons. Something happens. A do 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 do. This is not a clip show. Have no fear. I've got topics for years. So why is legendary skateboarder Tony Hawk in a skateboard battle with Homer Simpson? Well, let's talk about the episode. So Barting Over was an episode of The Simpsons on February 16th, 2003. The episode starts with Lisa dreaming she's at the Kennedy Center honors. And Marge says, well, here's another low-rated event, spring cleaning, and has Homer and Santa helper scooching on their butts to clean the floor. So they have to clean out the garage and all that. They find seemingly dirty films by Marge and Homer, but it's just pumpkin carving and all that. However, in one video, we see a Perfect Strangers episode in which the kind of neurotic Larry tells his cousin Belky, played by Bronson Pinchot, Belky, you're dancing in the toilet. And Belky goes, what? You never heard of flush dance? And then, there's a commercial and there for baby stink breath. And guess who it is? It's Bart. Bart doesn't remember being in a commercial despite eating a Butterfinger. Everyone knows those 90s commercials from Butterfinger. No better lay a finger on my Butterfinger. Anyhow, Bart does some kind of thing. Lisa taunts him for it, even Maggie does. However, he talks to Homer about it, and Homer says, I would tell you that on my deathbed. Really? It's not that big of a deal. Anyway, so Bart wonders how much money they have. Marge says, well, he was supposed to put it in a trust fund. La, 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 no, I didn't. And then says, well, the stock market's been back. No, nothing left, nothing left. What are you talking about? And Homer says that he had to buy back some incriminating photos of him kind of dropping Bart from a hotel balcony, kind of impersonating the Michael Jackson situation blanket in 2003. But then Homer says, well, look at the photos. I'm a hero for catching you. However, Bart decides to strangle Homer with his belt, like holds him with a belt. Marge says, Bart, let go of him. And Bart goes, what? I'm supposed to deal with this guy? He ruined me, Mom. And Homer says, that's right. You're mine till you're 18. And when you're 17, I'm going to work you twice as hard. Grrr. Bart tries to get Milhouse to promised not to talk about baby stink breath, but it got out. Nelson taunts him and then crashes into a tree. It was worth it. So anyway, Bart wants to know what to do about it, and Milhouse says, "Well, when my mom wants to get revenge on my dad, she just sends her lawyer." And so Kirk is perpetually crying and all that. So Bart goes to the lawyer's office, which is the blue-haired lawyer, aka Burns' lawyer, and says, "I want a divorce from my parents." You what? You heard me. I want a divorce from my parents. I heard you. I was talking to my secretary. You want? Get the standard child separation form. Yes, sir. Cute. So anyway, Bart actually makes a mashed potato thing of Homer, which is kind of cool. And then he stabs it. And then Marge says, I learned something. Forgive and forget. And then Homer says, of course. And then puts the WWJD bracelet. What would Jesus do? Unfortunately, Homer thought it was Geppetto. Geppetto's a G. So anyway, the blue-haired lawyer comes with the affidavit with a side of bacon. Bart, you're suing us, says Marge. Bart says, yes, I want to be emancipated. Homer says, emancipated? Don't you like being a dude? Well, it's technically emasculated. Well, I can't blame Homer for mixing that up. Lisa says, no, Dad. It just means that Bart will be a legal adult and can live by himself. Bart says, I always wanted a sewing room, but not like this, not like this. Kind of guilting Bart in the process. However, Bart says, it's not you, Mom. You've been cool, but Dad, I just can't live with. And Homer says, hey, my dad was terrible to me. And that's true. But I didn't sue him. I just put him in the worst nursing home possible. So basically, Grandpa gets his catheter and his IV switched every so often so that the pee goes back into his body. Please don't go. So anyway, the trial happens. Bart uses a Bart doll to say that, he took money out of my pockets and all that. And then Homer is talked about his rage things. He goes, why you little? At the lawyer. And then tells Judge Harm, yes, Constant Harm, yeah, Jane Katzmarek, I fucking hate Lois. There, I said it. Anyway, he tells Judge Harm that it's just a lapse in my judgment. Will the stenographer please read the last statement? Why you little? Why you little? Why you little? Why you little? And then Judge Harm draws Homer being hung. Ooh. So anyway, Judge Harm does state that no judge would let a child go off on his own. And then Homer says, woohoo! And then he tells Bart with his fist shaking, you thought I was a terrible father. Then now things will change. Except for this case. That child is as safe as a crawdad in a gumbo pod. Bart Simpson, I sentence you to be emancipated. And then Judge Harm tells Homer that he must garnish his wages. Garnish. That means half your paycheck goes to Bart. But, says Homer, half my paycheck goes to Bart, half my paycheck goes to my Vegas wife. What's left for Mo? Marge says, Homer, don't make this worse. I'll show you making worse, and then goes towards Judge Harm and then gets dragged away. I heard this was televised. It's kind of weird because Judge Harm kind of does have the hatred for Bart for his juvenile pranks and such. But nevertheless, Bart has to live in a loft. Marge tells him that he can't say the big four swear words to move in, but Bart reiterates that it's not you, it's not Lisa, it's not Maggie that's the problem, it's Homer. Homer, of course, doesn't like it one bit. However, Bart does struggle to live in the loft and then takes an elevator after being scared by a rat and finds a room with Tony Hawk, Blink 182, and a few other things. So he enjoys his new neighbors and all that. Tony Hawk even gives him a ride to school. Hee hee. But not on a skateboard. So anyway, Bart's happy as can be. And worst of all, he actually appears on a webcam with Tony Hawk. And Homer says, of all the channels I clicked on in the internet, it had to be his. Kind of a Casablanca homage. Homer vows to do better and all that, and even takes a sack of flour, raising it like a kid. Homer, Bart's 10. A sack of flour is not going to help the situation. But worst of all, the sack of flour was actually a real life baby, one of Cletus and Brandine's offspring. And they treat the sack of flour like a child. And Diet Betty, the one that when Marge tried to ban sugar from Springfield, she was exercising and all that to fit in Mama's coffin. She says, "Can I have some baby to put in my coffee?" The doctor said, "If you put more baby in your coffee, they'll take your leg away." Weird. Nevertheless, Homer and Marge and Bart. Homer and Marge, Lisa, and Maggie go to Bart's loft and then encounter a man who wants money for drugs. Marge gives him $5 to buy a suit. I'll buy a suit of drugs. Bart lives in luxury. Homer is not too happy, and I think he strangles Bart in this one. Anyway, Bart tells about his life being with Tony Hawk and Blink 182, and they're going to some kind of skateboard palooza. and all that. Homer tries his best to tell Bart he feels sorry, but Bart says he likes his new life. So during the skateboard competition, Martin actually gets a tattoo, which he thinks is a fake tattoo. No, it's real. Oh, and he faints. Jimbo and crew says he's suffered enough, but they still pummel him. So anyway, Homer tries desperately to get Bart back and has a word with Tony Hawk. So Tony and Homer will battle with skateboards that Homer's going to beat Tony Hawk. Marge and Lisa look on, and anyway, Marge tells Lisa, how many times has Homer done something stupid? Lisa, using a little hand counter, clicks it and says, I think it's 300, Mom. Marge goes, that's weird. I swore it was 302. We'll get to that later. But the fact is that, Homer does these stupid things. Bart doesn't like it one bit. But then Homer beats Tony Hawk and thinks he's won Bart back. Dad, this is not about you being cool. This is about you not caring about how I feel. And then Tony Hawk gives Homer some kind of skateboard lingo coded as parenting advice. And Homer says, finally, someone tells me stuff that I can understand. Well, Homer does have a weird brain. So then Homer realizes that he would have to pay Bart back. He said he made some stupid purchases. A lot of people said, well, hang on a minute. If he had to buy those incriminating photos of Bart back, wouldn't he have no money? Well, technically, he could have had some other stuff for purchases. However, Lindsay Nagel overhears Homer and decides to give Homer a commercial. Homer says he'll accept as long as he gives the profits to Bart. So basically, he's in a commercial for Fyrogain, a bit on top and a bit down below. However, the disclaimer says could cause loss of scalp and penis. He said penis. And Homer goes, what's this about losing my scalp? However, Bart tells Homer, don't worry about it. No one's going to remember this in 50 years. And then, of course, Homer's tombstone has him as infancy salesperson, and then Nelson goes, ha ha. So that was the episode in a nutshell. It was actually kind of nice to see that happen. So anyway, it was it was great and all that. It was watched by over 21 million viewers, had a 10.7 rating. That means 10% of people watched this one. The episode seems dated due to Blink 182 and Tyler Hawk saying that it's just ordinary. Four Finger Discount said they enjoyed the episode and liked the premise of Bart tiring of Homer's treatment of him. Anyway, it was callous for Homer wasting the money intended for Bart. But what can you do? So that was the episode in a nutshell. Let's talk about the Simpsons and their milestone episodes. So this was the promotional thing for Barting over 300 big ones. One tiny little problem, though, is that they actually miscounted the 300th episode. The 300th episode actually is the Strong Arms of the Ma. Remember that episode when Homer gets gets some weightlifting stuff and all that, and gets a lot of stuff from Rainer Wolfcastle's garage sale, and then Marge ends up being attacked by some guy in a goofy hat, and her pearls are taken away from her, and Marge is afraid to go outside and all that. She's a shut-in, and then she decides to bulk herself up with Homer's weight set, and then beats up the shit out of the guy, and then allegedly this episode's bad because Marge kind of gropes Homer and all that, and everyone is upset with that. Get over it. It's just roid rage. And she's told to do steroids from Bruce Powers, who somehow sneaks back into the Simpsons canon and all that. And then Homer manages to get Marge to cool down. Anyhow, so that was the 300th episode. The Fox crew actually miscounted because there were two holiday episodes, probably Treatise of Horrors, that they forgot to count. So they made the promotion for the 300th episode Barting over it, which actually makes sense because the Homer Bart dynamic was not that there. But the simple fact is that, it was parodied. Like when Marge says, how many times has Homer done this stuff? Lisa's hand counter says 300. And Marge says, I thought it was 302. Shish. So anyway, yeah, that was critical. Now, milestone episodes of Simpsons aside, I try to remember all the episodes that, from the first episode, of course, Simpsons roasting on an open fire. It's when the Simpsons Christmas special, they get out of the Tracy Ullman shorts universe, if you will. And of course, Bart gets a tattoo. Marge has to get it removed. There's no Christmas money. Homer has to work a menial mall Santa job and then tries to turn it into money at the dog track, but fails, but gets this little helper. The 100th episode, I believe, was Sweet Seymour Skinner's Badass Song. When Bart actually tries to find something for show and tell, he gets a rock, one of Lisa's rocks, but everyone else has one. So he gets that little helper too, and he's a big hit. And then he ends up running in the vent, and Ralph goes, "Miss Hoover, there's a dog in the vent." And she's like, "Ralph, remember when you thought Snaggerpuss was here? He was using the washroom." So anyway, Sensible Helper basically gets stuck in the vent. Willie does get him out, but unfortunately they both crash into Superintendent Chalmers, who basically fires Skinner for that. Bart feels guilty about getting Skinner canned like that and hangs out with Skinner and all that. Skinner tries to get his military stuff back together, but fails, and Ned Flanders becomes principal of the school, and because he brought God into the schools, Superintendent Chalmers refuses to allow Ned to continue and fires him and brings Skinner back. I can't remember what the 200th episode was. I know the 300th episode was Barting over / Strong Arms of the Maw. The 400th episode I remember was Can't Always Say What You Want. That was the episode in which the Simpsons go to the dentist and all that. Ludacris makes an appearance. Homer ends up buying the 1 millionth ice cream cone and gets fed it on Smartline, even though Ken Brockman says we should talk about the war in the Middle East. That war in the Middle East, not the current one. And then Homer knocks coffee into Ken's lap, and he said something about a motherfucker and all that. That's what was confirmed. And then Ned Flanders leads a callous response, making Channel 6 pay like $4 million for their fine. And basically, they have to cut back, and they all blame Ken for it. Lindsay Naegle does not want to fire Kent, but then finds Splenda in his coffee, which she mistakes for cocaine, fires Kent, and then basically Homer doesn't want Kent around because he's part of the liberal news, and Kent and Homer is easily influenced by Fox News. And of course, Lisa talks about why Fox News is so liberal, and Fox, as a broadcaster, broadcasts some weird stuff. And Ken Brockman says that basically it's on purpose to get fines that shuttles into the Republicans' funds. So he talks about that, and Channel 4 gives him his job back, realizing that they let Kent back, and they're getting in trouble. And then all that. And then the 500th episode was on that at long last leave. I probably might be doing a Simpsons episode about that later on, but anyhow, it's the episode that sees the Simpsons finally get kicked out of Springfield for their antics. Homer's drunken antics, and they showed the one incident that he basically destroyed the school after Springfield won the baseball pennant, and of course everyone blamed it on kids. Lisa gets ostracized because of her stupid campaigns, although they don't cost money, they're just annoying. And that's the one when she tried to save that beach whale. And then of course they talk about Bart's pranks, and one example was the prank that ruined the school's fire fun day, and then of course got Bart to take those experimental drugs, thinking that Major League Baseball was out to get him. Cookie Kwan insults Maggie because she refuses to cry, and then Maggie gives the throat slash to her. And Marge is ostracized because she puts her family in a positive light. So they end up going to the Badlands. Nobody wants to accept them. Marge lawns for Springfield. Homer brings her back to Springfield. They get caught, but then Marge makes a passionate speech about the fact that we found people that like us. And then Springfield realizes they need the Simpsons, so they move Springfield all the way to the Badlands, proving that they basically move from town to town, place to place every so often, and the geography is always wrong. So yeah, milestone episodes are pretty impressive and all that. I think Bart's birthday was the 750th or something. I can't remember. But yeah, it was amazing to see such milestones be had. And, Barting Over was pretty good. I thought it was okay. Like Judge Harm, I'm surprised she was on Bart's side. She wouldn't be on Bart's side for a few episodes. And Jane Kasmerick fucked Lois. I mean, Kasmerick's a good actress. She's done some stuff. But, Lois is a prick on Malcolm in the Middle. She does not belong in a comedy. She belongs in a dramedy, or basically a psychological thriller. because she uses psychological warfare on her family, and they accept it for what it is. But I can go on a Lois rant all I fucking want, but this is a Simpsons thing, so no. Anyhow, so that's it for this week. Next week, we're going to season 27. And no, we're not going to talk about the 27 Club and all that. Everyone knows what that is, I hope. But anyway, yes, we're going to season 27. We're going to be talking about an episode that explores the Bart and Homer dynamic even into the future. We're going to be talking about Barthood next week. I was thinking about Puffless, but that will be probably a later episode. Anyhow, I'm Jeff Diamond, and adieu.